Multicultural diversity and inclusion for speakers with less stress and more mindfulness. When I was a child, I had a book, a picture book with one foreign word per page. I loved this book. I loved learning about other cultures, and I loved learning languages. This is a casa. People in Spain live in a house. Next page. This is a futon. People in Japan sleep on a futon. I must have been born with DNA in my blood that said the world is one family for me, because I've always loved learning about other peoples in other countries, in other cultures, and learning many languages. And I've traveled the world. I feel very comfortable with this, and I'm so looking forward to helping you become more comfortable if this is not something that you are used to. Learning to speak to multicultural audiences with less stress is foundationally based in how you feel yourself. So let's relax, sit back, and see this as a map and a journey into multicultural awareness with less stress. The quest is to raise our multicultural intelligence, to increase our awareness and consciousness, and to do this, as I said, with less stress. So let's look at first landing in a country, landing on your feet. We have the form of address. How would you call a person? Some cultures are more formal, some are not. Take your cues from the people who have hired you to speak. Take your cues from observing other people. Do they address by the first name, the last name, Mr., Ms., Mrs.? Perhaps they address it as Mrs. with the first name, etc. And always have your business cards ready. Your business card may seem in American culture as not as important, and we write all over it and put notes, and sometimes we just snap a picture or swipe it through. But in other cultures, particularly in Asia, the business card is your golden ticket. Have it properly with your name, have it neat, have your title there, and your full information with the +1 for United States country code. Also on your business card, you might have the translation on the opposite side. Have this done by a professional translator, please. In Europe, when you put your title, you might put speaker, but do not put your branding title of the happiness coach or the most superb speaker of the nation. Just put a title and your degrees or your CSP after your name. Titles, formal degrees, and formal certifications, and the initials for these mean a lot in Europe. Then we have to look at how you give your business card or how you first greet someone. So holding the business card with 2 hands in Asia is most important, with your name facing out towards them. But before you give that business card, who gives the card first? Do you ask for the card like we might do here in networking in America? No, the most senior person in Asia is the one to ask you for your card first. Do not approach them and ask for theirs first. If you're in a formal business meeting discussing or doing training as another venue in your speaking business, you will be instructed where to sit, how to place the cards on the table, and all will be scheduled for you, most likely, in Asia. Now let's look back at how you would first address someone. Are you comfortable in New Zealand, for example, touching the forehead of a Maori person? Would you be comfortable shaking hands? Probably yes on shaking hands, but People in Asia, particularly Japan and China, are not, in Korea, are not comfortable shaking hands. So they may have a loose handshake, which you might interpret in your unconscious bias as not as sincere. But this loose handshake is because perspiration on the hands is not comfortable for those cultures. So they extend their hand to be polite to you, but it's not really of their comfort level. So think of also the double handshake in Central Asian countries. One hand over the other, and then the other hand, the third hand, and the fourth hand, and you're just shaking away. Or you might be in an Arab country or also in Central Asia, where you just, the fist goes to the heart as you pass someone on the street. So you enter a room and you just do the fist on the heart. Of course, bowing in China and Japan is also the customary greeting. But how do you bow? Who bows lower than the next person? Is a bow a greeting, or is the bow an apology? Or is the bow a super, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? So you will see people bowing at different degrees depending upon status and situation. Is this confusing? How will you learn it all? Keep your eyes open, watch others, and ask questions privately. Let's look at the idea of cultural behaviors, okay? We've looked at landing on your feet in a country, business cards, visitors etiquette, where to speak, where to sit, how to ask for what you need, how to relax and know it's being taken care of. I'd like to go back and talk about gift giving as well. Cultural behaviors in different countries have a more formal or informal look. And so gift giving kind of goes along with that. Do you give a gift to the whole group when you arrive? The group that helped you get there? Do you give a gift to one person? Can a man give a gift to a woman? Can a woman give a gift to a man? Different cultures operate different ways. For example, if you were in Saudi Arabia, you would not give a gift, a man to a woman. You would give the gift to a man and say, this is for your sister, or this is for your secretary, if you were a man. Now, if you were a woman giving a gift, you could give that gift woman to woman. Very complicated, and yet, before you even land in the country, it's good to look these things up, to talk to a cross-cultural strategist, and to find out from your host people what are the appropriate protocols. A good place to look for these information tips are on the website of the embassy of that country. We'll look at that a little bit more later. Gifts to the whole group, gifts to an individual, or the gift might be considered a bribe. So in America, we don't give gifts. And then do you give the gift if it's in the beginning, or do you give the gift if it's later on, after you've closed the business deal, after you've stayed in someone's home, after they've taken you to dinner? Again, different in every culture. Let's look a little bit also at when you first arrive. Someone may be greeting you at the airport, and then they just drive you into town in Northern Europe, and you're landing right away in an office. You barely go to your hotel and drop off your materials or change or take a break, and you're in the meeting right away. This would be an egalitarian society. But in another culture where it's more formal, you would be taken first to rest. Then a schedule would be made, and you would be wined and dined and shown around. You might even be there just having a presentation, and the presentation is just exploratory. They've invited you to come over, you're doing a talk, but they're not really sure if they're going to do a long-term training or business with you. That would be something that might happen in Asia, in China, in Japan, in Indonesia, in South Korea. So as these cultural behaviors are different, we have formal and informal. We have indirect and direct, relational and transactional, and long-term and short-term. Let's break it down a little bit. A formal culture would be very concerned with how you present the business card, where you sit, what you wear, and who introduces you. An informal culture is, hi, first name, walk in, sit anywhere you want, and no one cares. It's very fluid and very comfortable for Americans. And yet, even picture taking in a formal culture is standing, no smiles. In an informal culture, everybody's cracking a smile or doing something special to be unique. So watch what's happening in your mind when you see something that's very different than what you would normally think would be culturally the norm. Observe, take a deep breath, and just relax. Watch, watch, watch. If someone else is formal, you get formal. If they call you by your last name, you call by the last name. Until you see them calling themselves by the first name, then you could say, oh, please, just call me Harriet. Let's look at indirect and direct communications. You're going to be communicating on many different levels to initiate the speaking appointment, to then get on the stage, and then afterwards to bring closure and to continue for repeat business. Direct communication is very common for Americans, and indirect communication is very common in Asia, in Africa, and in parts of South America. However, when you're working with the UK or the continent of Europe, particularly Northern Europe, it's time is money, get straight to the point and speak clearly. How do we know? Well, here's an example. If you're not sure what exactly is going on, you might just ask someone, excuse me, I'd like to know when it starts. Excuse me, could you tell me what's happening right now? And allow them to give you the kind of information that you are asking for. However, if you're a take charge person, if you're a direct communicator in a direct culture, then you might just say, what time am I supposed to be on stage? And what time is the XYZ happening? It's all about time. It's very direct. I need a microphone. I need this. I need that. Thank you very much. Ask for what you need. Sometimes there are cultural differences that we may take personally when they're really cultural and we don't understand that. For example, an indirect communication might mean, there was in Japan, I'll give an example. In Japan, President Nixon and Prime Minister Sato and President Nixon were having a conversation about car imports and exports. And so Nixon asks Sato, he doesn't really ask him a question, he asks a direct statement in the form of a question and says, so you're going to lower your exports, right? Well, Sato-san said, we will try. This was really a no, but he had to be polite because in that culture, you would never confront someone and say, no, that's not correct. In order to save face for President Nixon, Sato just said, we will try. Well, Nixon went away thinking that meant yes, and it was a long time when things were rectified later on. It's not just about the translation of the words, it's about how the words are used to elicit the answers. If Nixon had said, how many, can we talk later? Is this, and it's something that was less confrontational, then that could have been a more direct answer. Relational and transactional kind of goes with this. We look at more in our culture developing a relationship that works enough to be able to be transactional and get the business done. But in many cultures, it takes a long time to develop that relationship because these cultures are long-term cultures. It may take years to get on the stage in Asia. I'll use Japan as an example since I lived there for so long, and I do speak fluent Japanese. Years and years of developing relationships in business and finally getting a place where you are always given the business comes with patience. It comes with time because the responsibility of entering the relationship is so important to those cultures that once you've entered the relationship, it's forever. Whereas here in the States or in continental Europe and UK, we might enter a business relationship very quickly. And if it doesn't work out over time, we'll just switch up relationships, work with someone else. When you see you're being taken out to eat, you're being shown around, you're being the guest in that country, and you're wondering, when is the real action going to happen for my business? Just let go. You are being assessed to see if you can work together. And this comes from the personal social approach up front before commitments are made. With this also, once the commitment is made, make very sure that you don't change the contract. You might think, oh, this is just wonderful. I've got 5 speaking engagements in these different cities in this country, in Asia. I'm going to again highlight Asia because it's so distinctly different than the way we operate in the States. You might think, okay, I have all these engagements lined up, and yet you say, oh, I'm so happy about this. Let me give you a bonus. Let me add in this extra thing. And they'll be taken aback and say, no, it's all been arranged. And that would be, from our perspective, an extra gift. I'm so happy, let me give you this add-on. But from their perspective, once it's settled, once it's in the contract, once it's set up, don't rock the boat. Okay. You also will be given lots of gifts in Asian countries. These are not bribes. It's just a gift-giving culture. Use your common sense and claim them if you need to for taxes in your country, depending upon where you are. Let's look at this lasting relationships with other foundations. Foundations of cultural foundations like egalitarian and hierarchical. Before we spoke more about behaviors, formal, informal, relational, transactional. But when we look at foundations of culture, we're looking at decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years of a cultural foundation. And one that stands out, egalitarian, hierarchical, is we see egalitarian in our culture as everyone has the same right and the same position to speak up, to have an opinion, to contribute to the team discussion. And we may, more often than not, do this out of turn. Of course, if someone's a project manager or the lead or the point person for your speaking engagement, they would have a little bit more to contribute. But everyone can have a voice and with equal right. However, in a hierarchical society, to follow the rules of the hierarchy keeps a sense of peace for each person because they know what to expect. It's a collective feeling of, it's all set in place. So the status is important, The age of a person is important. Respecting your elders is more important in many of these African and Asian countries than it would ever be shown in the United States. So when we're looking at this idea of hierarchy, we may on a subconscious level feel as if this isn't democratic, but this is our unconscious bias. You cannot take one piece of a culture out and judge it without looking at the whole culture, how it operates, and how it's integrated together. And as a guest speaker, we need to understand that we are in their territory, we are on their turf, and following their rules will make everything and everyone more comfortable. Unless, of course, it goes against your moral fiber, then that's another subject. Individualistic and collective cultures is one of the biggest cultural foundations that is distinct. A collective culture works together as a team. They take praise as a team, they take reward as a team, and to single someone out, even with a compliment for a good job done, in a collective culture is embarrassing to them because they've been singled out. Let's take the individualistic culture that we live in. We take the blame, we take responsibility. Sometimes we don't even want to ask someone for help because it may look as if we're inept, we're not qualified enough, or fear of losing our position. And so we gut through, we take responsibility, we do it unless we finally have to ask for help, and we get a lot of stress on our shoulders from it. And then on the other side, we look for reward and appreciation. Companies are always giving out the Employee of the Month award, the best this and that. Award giving goes with this sense of responsibility for having done the job as an individual. We work towards common goals in our society, but we do it along the way as an individual with a common purpose. So in cultures where it's more collective, again, I will say in parts of South America, in all of Africa, in the ancient cultures of the Arab countries, and in Asia itself, Central Asia and Asia, all very collective cultures. So that would be a moment, getting back to gift giving, if you were to give a gift, to give it to the group, food products to share, special products, maybe Wisconsin cheese, for example, or something that's unique to your environment from home. That would be a good gift to give that they could share. And looking at that idea of cultures that are more collective and more hierarchical, they are usually more ancient cultures as well. America is such a new country. We are such a new culture that as soon as you step out of our boundaries, we're in a whole nother place where thousands of years of ancient history is forming these base foundations. Think, though, of a traditional culture like India, revering, touching the feet of the elders, of the gurus, of the teachers, a lot of respect for the elders, and yet it's a highly innovative society. There's a huge middle class now, and the Indian population is growing and will overcome the largest population in the world currently, which is China. India is surpassing that. So here we have in India this highly traditional culture, and yet men and women are educated equally. And this brings about for them, with this newness of new businesses, they're very, very innovative. This is unusual for a traditional culture to be innovative. And so I'll give you an example of how a traditional and innovative culture works together. In India, someone started a business called the tiffins. A tiffin is a silver, stainless steel pot. Well, what they did was they made these pots with lids that could stack up on top of each other, and they could carry them on the back of bicycles with bungee cords and drive them through the city. What they did was the men at work wanted to have home cooking from their own wives, but they were off at work. How was this going to happen? The tiffin business came in and said, okay, we're going to go around to the homes, collect the home cooked meal from your home and put it in this tiffin and bicycle ride it or deliver it to you at your workplace at your lunchtime. What a great innovation on top of a traditional need. So when you think about this, how does this impact you as a speaker? You have to feel, okay, innovative culture, but traditional. Again, watch, look, see how people are interacting with each other, and ask ahead, your point person, what am I supposed to do? What would be the best thing to do? Read, go to cultural places in your own hometown. Talk to people from that culture here in the States that can help you understand the differences before you actually land on your feet somewhere else. Now let's look at this from another point of view. Perhaps you are a speaker that is not necessarily traveling overseas. Here we are, USA, multicultural, so multicultural. We have so many cultures here that it's more than likely, even in your hometown, that you would be speaking to an audience that included people from different cultures. The difference is because you're on American ground, you may just kind of assume that these people will behave the way that you thought they would because you're all in the same state or all in the same place. But these cultural behaviors and foundations are carried with us as we move around the world. There are many people who have landed in the United States who were born somewhere else. Did you know that of the people in the world that speak English as their first language, speaking it, that it is 24% are native speakers? Let me clarify that. 24% of the English speakers in the world who use English for business are native English speakers, only 24%. That means the other percentage of the people are using English to do business, but it's not their first language. People in India talk English together because there are so many dialects. They may know Hindi, and they also know Urdu or other dialects, but they're speaking English in business. So you may be on the stage speaking to someone, and you may have to clarify in a different way. But let's back up a moment before we talk about English as a second language or speaking English to non-native speakers. Let's look at time. Time is a cultural value. We have a judgment attached to a cultural value that says on time, late, or early, and there's a judgment around it. It's the appropriateness, okay? So here's an example. I was giving a presentation virtually to a group in Barcelona, Spain. People came late and there was nothing about it. It was the norm. Time is not a value among those people. And yet here I was thinking, okay, we got to start on time, end on time. What am I going to do? And everyone was so relaxed, just coming in, okay. So I knew this already, but I still, inside of me, was thinking, what do I do? Accept it, wait. And the moderator was very comfortable and just said, they'll be coming in, they'll be coming in. It's not personal. It was cultural. And yet in Germany, if you're 15 minutes early, you're already just on time. If you're 5 minutes, if you're on time, you're already late. So Germany is one of the most culturally time-conscious societies I've ever met. Americans were a little bit, we're on the time consciousness side, but a little bit, 5 minutes here and there may be acceptable. Okay. So there's also this feeling of internal and external control. Let's say something goes wrong and someone says, well, that's just the way it was going to be. It happened. It's fate. And yet Americans, we are in a place where we feel that control is internal. Going back to that individualistic mindset of I'm responsible, well, also my internal control. If I'm responsible, that means I can make the change. If something goes wrong, that means that I'm able to fix it. Not every culture thinks that way. They just, okay. India is another example of that. It's just, okay, that's the way it was. It happened. Let's move along. And we're always trying to fix it, change it, because we have an internal control of that we can make a difference in this sense. Saving face and giving honor, respect, and trust to each individual will always set you apart. Let's think, how can you develop some kind of personal dynamic in a culture or a language that's completely different? Learn hello, goodbye, thank you, and please in that language. How are you? Add it in. Learn a couple simple phrases that will set you apart. It shows that you're interested in the people you're speaking to and working with. It shows that you care. And respect, honor, and trust. Here is something to consider. Would you rather be right? Or would you rather have a relationship? When I've spoken to German audiences, I have to change my mindset inside myself and say, whoa, because the style of German education in universities is debate style. Debating with the professor, debating with the presenter. So I might be in the middle of a presentation and someone out of the blue, they're not asking a question. They're debating with me, contesting a point when I'm hired to be the expert in the field. And I just have to remember, this is their style of communication in that situation, and listen, take it in, and then make my point. It's debate. And yet, with the example I used before with Prime Minister Sato and Nixon, you would never debate, you would never confront. Saving face. Once I worked in a Japanese company, an import-export company, and I was responsible for all the correspondence that went out of the company in English. My colleague, a fluent English-speaking Japanese woman, myself, a fluent Japanese-speaking English native speaker. We worked together. Our boss, a woman, senior VP, learned old school English from books and just after World War II. When I wrote my letter to send off to the Indian carpet makers that we were importing carpets from, she read the letter and said, this is wrong. And she corrected my fluent native English. I knew that it was important to have her save face and to honor her as the senior person, both in age and status, and that the relationship was more important than me being right. So when she handed me back this paper, this letter I had written, all changed up, I said, oh. And of course, the changes were incorrect. They were grammatically incorrect, but I merely said, oh, sumimasen. It must have been my Ohio English. Thank you. And then I went back to my desk. My colleague, Kyoko-san, says to me, we're going to send your letter and we're going to put her letter in the file. All around saving face, everyone had their role and position, and the customer got the letter that they really needed. That's an example. It may or may not seem honest to us, but it is the way that integrates into this matrix of relationship, honor, respect, saving face, and getting the job done with peace and calm among all for the collective society where no one's standing out and being the individual. Take a deep breath. A lot of information, I can imagine. Now, let's look at that. Let's look at families. Let's say that someone doesn't follow through with you on planning your schedule or arranging the situation. And their excuse is, or they're late, or they miss a meeting. The excuse may be, I was with my family. My cousin had a problem and we had to go to lunch and talk about it for 3 hours. This is because in some cultures, the family is much more important than the work. Don't try to do business in August in Europe. And if you're working in a Muslim country, Fridays are the day everyone's closed, kind of like Sundays in a Judeo-Christian society. Here we are looking at family is more important, but that's the matrix in the bond. So family groups might take the look of extended families, collective working groups, developing handicrafts or businesses that are small businesses that work as a collective, and they work well together. And they consider it family. It's strong. Nepotism, hiring your relatives, is illegal in the United States, unless it's a private business. In corporations, there are laws, there are rules and standards about nepotism, but go to countries, you might be going to a country, Saudi Arabia might go to United Arab Emirates, and you're over there, and all of a sudden you walk into a room and there are 5 people in the business meeting that are all related. And then you and maybe a couple colleagues, it seems odd. So don't take it personally, it is cultural. So let's look at how then we can become more comfortable culturally. We would do cultural participation. As I mentioned before, we have societies of different cultures within. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and we have these cultural museums, we have cultural clubs, we have events, we have parades, we have people who are trying to keep up with the language and the culture of their ancestors right here in Cleveland. I went to Dia de los Muertos, the Festival of the Dead, the Day of the Dead, which is Halloween. Right here in Cleveland, there was a great festival. It was wonderful. I learned so much with my Mexican friends that took me there. So these cultural festivals are a way to participate locally to get comfortable. You can go to the embassies, you can go to the consulates, you can read on the official government websites what to do, what not to do. For example, in Thailand, you would never want to pat a child on the head because this is considered the most honorable part of the body, where the soul enters the body when we're born. So these are usually, if there are very strong cultural do nots, they're on the embassy websites. You can also, if you have an interpreter, if you have a translator, make sure this person is truly a professional translator. You want your slides to be properly translated. You want to be sure that you're not on stage with a translator that is fumbling around reaching for the word. Just because someone's son studied English in college doesn't mean they're a professional translator. Professional translators are quite different than even people who speak the language well. So then also, if you're on stage with a translator, make sure that you allow for double the time, because you have to speak, then they speak, and make it short. Make what you're saying short enough so they can remember it afterwards. Once I was simultaneously translated in Belarus at an entrepreneurship forum convention. I was one of the 4 people on the panel stage, the only woman and the only entrepreneur, by the way. And so I had on these translation headsets, and they were translating into Estonian, into Belarusian, into Russian, and into English. And I was the only, person from English-speaking native there. So there I am, I'm being translated, or they're translating what the other people are saying. And it was a little delayed. It was simultaneous, but delayed. And so after the audience laughed at some joke, I got it into English, into my headsets. I'm on stage, and all of a sudden I'm laughing when everybody else had stopped. So make sure that you get comfortable with that. I don't think it was too bad, but I heard it and I thought, I'm the only one laughing, because they had already laughed at the joke. So there you are with translators. Let's look at how to speak English to non-native speakers. I'm going to give you a handout with this program that is laying out some of the more specific tips, but I'm going to leave you right now with just a couple. One is, first, slower, not louder. If someone doesn't understand you, look at their expression on their face. Maybe they don't want to say they didn't understand you because it might be confronting to you and they're shy. Perhaps in Asia, you wouldn't want, someone's not going to say, oh, I didn't get what you meant. They're just going to nod their head a lot. So you have to kind of see if there's cues. Say, did you understand? Should I repeat it? Or you can just go more slowly. If you have a blank look from someone, speak more slowly. They're not hard of hearing, just slower. Or find other words that express the same idea, but raising your voice is not the solution. Now, here's another one. When yes can mean no. Double negatives at the end of a sentence, for example. You don't want to go to lunch after this, do you? Well, does that mean yes or no? It could be yes with the implication of yes, you're correct, I don't want to go. Or it might be yes, I want to go. Or it might be no, I don't want to go. Or no, your statement is incorrect, I really do want to go. So complicating your sentences with questions at the end of a statement could be confusing. Make it direct, make it clear. Do you want to go to lunch? Again. And asking questions is always a plus. On the stage and also in the business environment, or even socially, if you're invited somewhere. Humor does not usually land well across cultures. If it's an obvious humorous statement of you dropped your fork, or you didn't know how to use chopsticks, or you make kind of a self-referred joke of this, oh, this is new for me, look at me, excuse me, that's okay. But a humorous joke, I just don't even bother. Another thing I don't speak about in multicultural audiences or with people across the world is politics or religion. In fact, I usually don't talk about it very much outside my own small circle of friends, because the more global we are, the more differences in opinions there may be. And some people have very strong opinions. So staying neutral, staying on your subject, staying in your lane, and treating people with respect, honor, and trust is a great way to continue to build relationships that last. Here are a couple phrases someone may not understand. in sports jargon. That idea was way out in left field. Or that business really, she hit a home run, really landed the deal. And again, in my handout, I will give you some of these examples. Let's look at the nonverbal communication across cultures. On the stage, we are using our hands. We're having eye contact. We may use silence. We may or may not touch people. Our body language. We learn this as speakers, but let's look at some cultural nuances. First of all, gestures. The OK symbol is not okay. The OK symbol in a couple countries in South America and in Arab countries is a very lewd and lascivious gesture. Do not use the OK sign. Pointing your finger is also not well received in many cultures. So keep your hands kind of to yourself instead of pointing at. Just gesture with the whole hand if you can. Other gestures, you can learn country by country or culture by culture. But also remember that people move across borders. Cultures don't have borders. Countries do. So you may find people of different cultures within a certain country. So look beyond just the international boundary of that country. Say, for example, okay, this is Belgium or this is Finland. And look also at what other cultures might be in that country that you're speaking in. Eye contact in Russia is very important. If you're not having eye contact for a long time, it might be considered that you're hiding something. When you're drinking, keep looking. When you're talking, keep looking. In the United States, we consider eye contact important, but we look away once in a while. We don't want to have the heavy stare all the time, but it means you're paying attention. And in Asia, looking down frequently is considered humbling oneself. It's taking a moment to go within, to be quiet, to reflect. Staring or looking with eye contact consistently is not comfortable for people who live in Asia. Body language. You know how you might take a photograph or smiling, or someone might take a photograph very stiff and standing. That's a cultural difference as well. Standing with your arms across or standing with your arms at your sides, having your head slightly tilted or not. These are indications of body language. If you don't know, just stand tall and soften your gaze. A nod of the head is universal. Silence is golden. Silence is golden. I once took my yoga guru to meet my Aikido martial arts master in Japan. I was going to be the interpreter for the two great men. I sat there for 20 minutes while they sipped green tea and not one word was spoken. Afterwards, I asked my guru, who's American, Indian from America, East Indian from America. Well, I was there ready to translate for you. You didn't say anything. And his response was, we were communicating. We didn't need the words. Sometimes someone may seem like they're not paying attention to you because they look downwards. Or even if you do more than just speaking, you do training or coaching, consulting, you might be in a meeting with a group, doing a group activity, and someone might seem almost like they're falling asleep there. Now, granted, they might be falling asleep for a moment, you never know. But if they're from Asia, it's quite often the looking down and gazing within is a reflection. They're tuning into the internal absorption of what is being said and capturing the energy of what is happening around them in the room. So many messages are taken from the nonverbal. See if you can understand this. I was in Afghanistan, looking out the window of my small little hotel room above a tea shop. And across the way, across the aisle, was another woman with her window. And she said that to me. Come here, drink tea. And I said, no, you come here and drink tea. And she said, no, my man, no, he wouldn't let me. And I said, no, my man won't let me. And we both went like that, just shrugged our shoulders. Well, it wasn't really true that someone had told me I couldn't go, but I didn't feel comfortable to go to a stranger's house if she wasn't even allowed to go out to come see me. But the importance of that wasn't if we drank tea together or not. I will never forget her. Afghanistan, 24 years old I was. What a cultural difference for a young person. And yet that silent communication, knowing the value of tea drinking as a gesture of friendship. So someone says you want to have some tea and you're in Asia or you're in the Middle East, drink the tea. It's a gesture of friendship. Just a little story for you. So as we move forward into more specifics, let's look at how this really, really relates to the speaking business. As you know, you have to enter into the relationship to get the work. Then you're on the stage with the audience, or you land in the country, or you may be doing a multicultural audience here in the United States. More than likely, there's always going to be someone that's not like you. We have to drop the idea that this is a box or a category of people and that everyone is like this. What I've just laid out was a general format of how people think in certain cultures. But in the end, you have to see each person as perhaps being at one end or the other end of that cultural norm, just as we may feel that we fit in or not to what's expected of us in our cultural surrounding. So it's like a recipe, a great recipe. You have to learn to relax and let go. But let's look again at what are the specifics that this applies to. Meetings, everything about time management, how to give feedback, how to take criticism, decision-making, developing professional relationships, speaking English to non-native speakers, communication styles. Oh my gosh, you might be speaking to someone in Asia and they just say a few words, long silence. Another few words, long silence. In America, we're learned to speak, wait, have the other person speak. And if we're a little animated emotionally, we might cross-talk a little bit. But boy, if you're in a Latin-speaking country, if you're in a Spanish-speaking country in South America, the periods, or in Spain, the period of time that you'll be talking is long. They're talking long, 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 long. And someone else gets excited and comes in and over talks, and they're talking at the same time for a long period of time. There's hardly ever any break. just a cultural difference in communication, but everyone's hearing what everyone else says. Also, how to make that audience connection, how to negotiate, how to travel with comfort instead of fear, or that being a little stressed about not knowing why something is not working the way that we would expect, and networking and getting repeat business. Most of all of this can be laid out as a way that we can look at how to increase our joy factor. So when we are moving into all these things and we're looking at interactive experiences as well, awareness for group activities, do you touch or not? You would not touch in man and women in certain cultures, for example. Recognizing that personal space is emotional space. Here in the States, we have a lot of space between people physically when we're talking. But in other cultures, they're used to being in a great population with a lot of people, close space, but because they can go within. I'm referring to China, Japan, Korea, India. You can go within and still be touching someone's body in a public train, for example, or a subway, but there's a sense of distance because you've gone inward. These are things that you can start to become more comfortable with. And how to engage participation from your audience, because more and more as speakers, we need to really keep the audience engaged. And that means they need to be active. Even if it's not a training, even if it's not a group coaching session, but this is you on the platform speaking, you still need that engagement. How do you elicit it? If you're in a hierarchical society, you would actually call on the person that is most senior first and ask them a very simple question that they would definitely be able to answer well, so that then they save face, they are the leader, and all the other people will start to talk or raise their hand in the audience. That is what you could do in Asia. Because otherwise, if you just say, hey, does anyone have a question? You may have a very quiet audience. On the other hand, to be really specific with a very talkative culture, or people that are individual in piping up and saying phrases like, in one word, tell me what's your takeaway today. Then you've cut out the idea of a story, someone asking a long-winded reply, and everyone can just popcorn up their answer. Just suggestions for group activities. Moving now into the idea of how do we do this all with less stress? It takes practice. It's like a recipe. At first, you go by the recipe. Do this, don't do this. Do your homework, learn it, ask people, observe. Get the ingredients down. Put this ingredient in, this proportion of it, exact. The recipe's there. That's what you do the first time you make your recipe. And then the next time you start to innovate and start to change it. And then you start to get comfortable. Where is your comfort level? How can you make this new recipe that now is yours? And then ultimately you're just opening up the refrigerator, picking what you need to get out of it, because it's easy. This is what's left over. This is what we have to use up. This is what the main base is. And not even worrying about the ingredients in the specific amounts, because you are now the chef. So it takes time to feel comfortable speaking across cultures. But one way that you get to move from formulated to relaxed is my guide for you for continuing this journey. It is called the 3 A's model. Awareness is first. Awareness of yourself first. Be aware of when your shoulders start to tighten. Be aware of when you start to feel that you are having some unconscious bias that's become conscious all of a sudden. Are you being judgmental? Be aware of yourself, and you will become more aware of the other. Be more accepting. The second A, acceptance of yourself. When you accept that you are human, that sometimes things aren't moving in the right direction of what you expected, and you accept that you are born in a different place with a different background, even families are different within the same community, and just accept this is how I am, but I'm open to learn, then you will become more accepting of the other. And the third A is adjustment. When you really truly go from thinking down to heart and feeling, you can finally go into your gut and become action-oriented to make adjustments. Adjustment is the third step, but adjustments that last or that are true and foundational for change don't come when there's still a residual of I don't accept it. Or definitely when there's a mental block of non-awareness. So awareness, acceptance, and adjustment. When you make the shift and you make the adjustment will happen for the other as well. This is my motto and guide for the journey. And I do want you to find a lot of E's in life, E-A-S-E. Be exploratory in your expansion. E's, explore, expand. A, ask questions and follow the 3 A's, awareness, acceptance, and adjustment. Simplify, the S, simplify. Ask and study and learn and prepare for exactly what it is you need then. And the rest will become the next chapter or the next audience or the next speech you do. And lastly, the last E for ease is enjoy yourself. If you are enjoying yourself, you know that you're prepared, you know you've done your best, and you can relax and enjoy what it is that we do as speakers, which is to connect with people, help them change, help ourselves move forward, and make the world a different place. Finding the noble direction for your global connection will best come from the compass within yourself and honor, trust, and respect of the other. There is a phrase in Hindi. It is, the world is one family, is the translation. It is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family, and we are here to enjoy knowing ourselves better, connecting with others to know ourselves better, and to give the gifts of each individual on this planet, one candle at a time. You as a light, as a speaker, you light one candle and other candles are lit along the way. One simple action of kindness, one phrase in a foreign language, one smile or gesture or nod of understanding, and then let your specialty and your lane of your speaking fly and light up the world. I truly believe in you, and I know that we all together can make an impact as speakers.